All right, lesson 11A. We're going to look at hypothesis testing when we have small samples, which means we have to use a t-test. So if you remember from our confidence intervals, the times when we use a t-test are when the sample size is small, which means less than 30. So if n is less than 30, and the population standard deviation is unknown. Okay, so that would be the sigma symbol. Sometimes they might give you like the S of X, that's standard deviation, but that is for a sample. So S is the sample standard deviation. If we have that, but not sigma, that's when we're going to use a t-test. Okay, so steps going to be very similar to when we did our z-test. Okay, we're going to write the null and alternative hypotheses. We're going to identify the level of significance, the alpha that's going to be given to us in the problem. And then here's where it's going to get a little different. When we did z-test, we would look at the z-table and we could get the p-value from the middle of the table. The t-table doesn't work like that. Okay, it gives us the critical value. It doesn't give us a p-value, but we can get a p-value from a graphing calculator. Okay, so we're going to use our graphing calculator to perform the t-test, and then it will give us the p-value. Then, just like we did before, we'll reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis when we compare the p-value to the alpha, and then we'll write a one-sentence conclusion. Okay, so let's look at an example. All right, a used car dealer says that the mean price of the 2008 Honda CR-V is more than $20,500. You think he's wrong, so you get a random sample of 14 cars and has a mean price of $19,850 with a standard deviation of 1,084. Is there enough evidence to reject the dealer's claim at alpha equals 0.05? Okay, so first thing we need to do is write the null and alternative hypotheses. Okay, so I have my null hypothesis and then my alternative hypothesis. Okay, usually, not always, but usually the alternative hypothesis has the claim. He says more than 20,500. Okay, so because that doesn't have the equals, it's just more than, that's going to go in my alternative hypothesis. So my alternative is that the mean is greater than 20,500, which means my null would be that the mean is less than or equal to 20,500. Okay, identify the level of significance given to me in the problem. Alpha is 0.05. All right, perform a t-test on the calculator, and those directions were on the last screen. Okay, over here I gave you some information. Here's kind of what the screen is going to look like, and I'm going to pull up my calculator here in a second to go through it. They're going to ask you for a mean null, a sample mean, a sample standard deviation, and a sample size. Okay, so the mean is, these are the options: not equal to, less than, or greater than. That's going to come from our claim. All right, what is our claim? Well, here he says the claim is that the mean price is more than, so we would select greater. Okay, the mean null comes from the null hypothesis. So our mean that we're testing is 20,500. X bar then is the sample mean. So when we took our sample of 14 cars, we had a sample mean of 19,850. Okay, so X bar is sample, mean 0. All right, that's the population mean that we're testing. Sx is the sample standard deviation, and then n is the sample size. So I'm going to grab my calculator. Okay, the steps are, we press menu and we want stat. So that's number 2. Okay, then I'm going to do test, so F3. We're doing a t-test, so F2. And we only have one sample, so F1. Okay, the default here is going to be list. We don't have our data typed into a list, so we're going to pick var, variable, so that I can actually type in the things that I know. Okay, so the first thing is just the mu. What's our claim? So the claim that we're testing is that it is greater than 20,500. Okay, 20,500 is that null hypothesis number that we're actually testing. That's the population. X bar is the sample mean. So from my sample, it was 19,850. Okay, on your calculator, this is probably going to say SX, right? That is the sample standard deviation. So that was 1,084. Okay, then N is my sample size. So we had a sample of 14 cars. Okay, and then the N, I'm just going to press enter one more time. Okay, the first couple things, like the U is greater than 20,500. That's just saying this is what we're testing. X bar, we typed in, standard deviation, we typed in, N, we typed in. The important number for us is going to be P. So that P value right there, 0.9785, that's just like when we got the P value from the Z table. Okay, so this time instead of having to look at a table, the calculator is just going to give it to us. All right, so the P value that we got was 0.9785. Okay, 0.9785. All right, then step 4 and 5 is what we did in our earlier hypothesis testing units. So decide to reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. What we're going to do is we're going to compare P and alpha. All right, so 0.9785 is my P value. My alpha value was 0.05. If P is greater than alpha, then we fail to reject. All right, fail to reject, just like our units, I think 8 and 9, okay, or 7 and 8. When we did hypothesis testing, same rules. So if P is less than alpha, we reject the null hypothesis. If P is greater than alpha, we fail to reject the null hypothesis. Okay, so then my one sentence conclusion, we're going to say reject or fail to reject. So in this case, it was fail to reject the null hypothesis because, tell me about P and alpha, because P was greater than alpha, so, all right, and then the so is in the context of the problem. So there is not enough evidence to support the dealer's claim. All right, remember the dealer's claim was my alternative hypothesis. If I fail to reject, then I'm saying this null hypothesis is true. So the mean is less than or equal to 20,500. The dealer said it was more, so he's wrong. Okay, and that's it for one sample t-test.